Hello, everyone. My name is Tim Bryce with the National Weather Service here in El Paso, Texas. And I'd like to thank you for joining us today for today's Monsoon Awareness Week. This is day 4 of our Hangouts. We've had 3 previous days. We talked about flash flooding on Monday. Tuesday was lightning. Yesterday was microburst and downburst winds. But today, something that's visually stunning and very difficult to drive in, and that is dust storms. And we got a smaller panel than we have the last couple of days, but we're joined first of all by John Fawcett, who is the warning coordination meteorologist from the weather office in El Paso. John, how are you doing?
Doing good.
Very good. And we're also joined by Dan. Pronounce your last name for me, because I'm going to mispronounce it.
No, that's okay. It's Lions.
Lions. No, I would not have come close. So you're a forecaster there at the Phoenix Weather Office, right?
Yep, that's correct.
Very good. So we're going to be talking about dust storms, what causes them. We're going to go over some of the safety that you can use, safety ideas that you can use if you're caught in a dust storm and you see one coming, if you're driving or at your residence, to keep yourself safe. The concern when it comes to these dust storms is when you're driving. So we want you to be safe when you're out and about and driving around. But basically, first of all, let's talk. John, can you kind of give everyone an idea of what a dust storm is? I think we all have an idea of what it looks like, but what causes them, and are there different categories of them?
Well, first of all, most people think of springtime for the dust storms, and that's not what we're concentrating on here. And those ramp up slowly, covering several states sometimes, and take hours to grow and hours to tone down. And you get plenty of warning for something like that. And it's on a sunny day. What we're dealing with here is much quicker and much more dangerous, in my opinion. They are convective dust storms, thunderstorm outflows kicking up the dust. It looks like a tidal wave of dust sometimes. And the name for those that we use in the Southwest, it actually came from the Middle East. It's called haboob. And these are something that have caused deaths across Arizona, New Mexico, and other portions of the Southwest, because folks will be driving along and it doesn't take long. Within seconds, the visibility can drop to near zero. So if you're not aware of what's going on around you, you haven't taken the safety precautions and your life is in danger. So these thunderstorm outflows, especially early in the monsoon for at least New Mexico and far west Texas, early in the monsoon when you haven't had enough rainfall and the dust lifts rather easily, that's when they're most common in our portion of the desert Southwest. I did live in Phoenix for about 3.5 years. It didn't seem to matter. We had them in July, August. It was crazy, and Dan can address that a lot more specifically. But that's basically what we're talking about: the thunderstorm-induced dust storms, haboobs.
Haboobs, very good. And they do present definite challenges for drivers, especially on the highways across New Mexico. We've got the main north-south interstate is I-25 in New Mexico, and then east-west runs I-10, and then that runs on into Arizona. And Dan, I was wondering if you could talk about, I forgot one other thing. If you do have any questions you want to ask our panel tonight, you can tweet us at using the hashtag MAW 2015. So that's Monsoon Awareness Week 2015. So if you do have any questions, feel free to tweet at us, and we'll get those answered as soon as I see them come in. All right. So we were talking about how do dust storms kind of present themselves in Arizona, Dan?
Well, as far as we're concerned in the Phoenix area, we see a lot of our biggest, angriest looking dust storms during the monsoon, and a lot of times we'll see thunderstorms develop somewhere to the north of Tucson. They'll go through their phase, they'll dissipate, and they'll put out some really gusty winds, and those gusty winds start to move to the north through Casa Grande, and then they keep pushing to the north, and then they start making their way into the the outer fringes of the Phoenix area, and then eventually they basically envelop all of downtown, and then keep pushing all the way through the West Valley and basically keep going. And these are really long-lived, high-impact events. If anybody has ever seen one in person, it's really something to behold. It's really just a massive phenomenon, and it gets awfully dark and really hard to see anything if you happen to get caught in one of these. It's definitely one of our most significant hazards during the monsoon season.
Wow, up on my screen I have a picture of one of the haboobs as it was coming into Phoenix. And let's see, I think I have another one here. Here's a smaller one. And then here's one more. Like John just kind of mentioned there, it's like a tidal wave of dust pulling into the town. A little later we'll show some videos that I have showing that, but it's just very impressive, and you can very quickly see how difficult you'll go from almost perfect visibility to all of a sudden you can't see more than a few feet in front of you. Now, some of the challenges with this is that during the monsoon season, we'll have lots of thunderstorms popped up here and there and all over the place, and they many times will put out these outflow boundaries, but they don't always kick up the dust. And one of the challenges is to kind of detect where these winds are kicking up dust, where's the visibility going down. And Phoenix has been pioneering one of the who is it? Is he the Sioux? Is Ken the Sioux?
WCM.
The
WCM. That's right. Ken Waters is the WCM there in Phoenix, and he's been pioneering building these very cheap but very effective dust storm detection kits that they can kind of deploy at certain locations around southern Arizona. And Dan, I was wondering if you could talk about that project a little bit more.
Yeah, what I'll do is I'll share my screen because I've got a couple of slides that I'll show you real quick. Can you see my screen now?
It's up on the screen now, yes.
So let me just talk you through this real quick. Part of the problem that we have when it comes to detecting dust storms is that there's a radar in Phoenix, there's a radar in Tucson, and unfortunately the radar beam is above where the dust storm is actually occurring, so we can't see it until it starts to get pretty close to the radar. So that's it's a challenge that we have to overcome by coming up with new technology and new ideas how to sense the dust at the ground. So Ken Waters, our warning coordination meteorologist, he's a very tech guy, and he really likes playing around with low-cost sensors and computers and things like that. So Ken had this idea that if you were to combine a cheap computer, maybe only spend $35 or $40 on a computer, and spend about $10 or $15 on a sensor, an air quality sensor, perhaps what you could do is merge them together to sense what the air quality is at a given time. Now, on a normal day when there's no dust, your air quality should be pretty good. There shouldn't be too much in the way of dust in the air. However, during a dust storm, these sensors should show a big spike in the amount of dust that's in the air. It's not going to tell us exactly what the visibility is, but what it'll do is it'll give us a hint that, hey, something is disrupting the air quality down where the sensor is located. Let's take a look at it and investigate and see if there's any blowing dust going on. So what I did earlier today was I took a picture of what one of these dust sensors looks like. It's pretty low tech. When you look at this, these are the components that we have in there. There's two computers, there's a power supply, which is on the left, and then the air quality sensor is up at the top of the screen. It's that little circuit board that's attached to the side. And what we do is we take these out to a location where we would normally see dust. We close it up.
Hey Dan, it's still on the first image. I think if you you're gonna have to double click on it or run it there. That's the fourth image.
Okay, so let me back up real quick. So
there you go.
Here's what the inside of what one of these sensors looks like.
There you go.
You've got your power supply on the left, you've got a computer on the bottom, you've got another sensor computer on the right, and then you've got the actual dust sensor itself at the top here. And what we do is we take it and we close it up and we put it in somebody's backyard who we've talked to ahead of time, and this is basically what it looks like. And we have one of these out there at present, and we're just testing it right now. We want to make sure it can stand up to the elements and basically, survive an Arizona summer. We had one of these out last year. It did very well. We're trying a little different enclosure this year, and we're going to see how it works. But we're feeling pretty optimistic about the potential that this project has. It really should help us get a heads up for when there's dust forming before it gets into the Phoenix area.
Very good. I have an image here of what the sensors, if you put them all together, if they were able to detect the visibility going down. This isn't actually one of the sensors. This is from the EPA as they were doing some sampling, but you can see how you have very low particulates, hardly anything in the air, and then all of a sudden it spikes up real high, and you end up, with lots of stuff in the air, lots of very low visibility. So I'm excited about the project you guys are working on. For the nerds in the audience who are watching, the little computer in there is a Raspberry Pi. You may have heard of that. Very inexpensive computer that you can purchase, and then you can stick different things on. And in this case, they've stuck on the dust sensor, the visibility sensor, so they can see how much dust is in the air and just get an idea. So right now, like you said, you only have one of those deployed, and then is Ken planning on doing more, or is there an idea to spread the network out to further areas?
We've actually purchased, we're waiting for them to arrive, but we've purchased the components, so it'll just be a matter of having them arrive in the office. We'll install the software, we'll get them ready to go, we'll get them weatherproofed, so to speak, and then it's just a matter of getting them out there into the field.
Very good, very good. Do you guys have an idea? Go ahead, John.
Oh, let me add that the interest to spread outside of Arizona, UTEP, and probably New Mexico State University, but for sure UTEP, they are interested in getting these things installed far west Texas into southern New Mexico, and Ken has been working with UTEP.
Very good. They're just, we have weather sensors all over the place. We take readings for temperature and wind speed and wind direction, but there's not as many visibility sensors or dust sensors out there. So this will be a boon for us, for the NM Department of Transportation and Arizona Department of Transportation, as far as trying to get an idea of where these dust storms are. And once half the battle is knowing that they're out there, so that we can get the word out. And I know that in New Mexico, they're very proactive of trying to get some roads shut down if there's too much dust. Is that how they handle things out in Arizona, Dan?
Our partners at ADOT are very proactive about using the messaging signs that you might see on the highway. Anytime we issue any sort of dust storm warning or blowing dust advisory, they're very proactive about putting that up there, just to give people a heads up, especially for folks that are heading from Phoenix down toward Tucson, basically the folks that are going to be driving right into it. They are very proactive about getting the word out ahead of time and giving people advance notice so they don't find themselves in a dangerous situation.
Well, it's funny you mentioned driving right into it. I'm going to show a video of a person who videotaped them driving into a haboob. It's a little rocky here at the beginning, but you can see they got pretty good visibility here, and then as they drive into it, they're going to slow down the video here and they'll drive into it. They go from pretty good visibility, almost unlimited, to, oh, that's pretty bad visibility, and then it only gets worse from there. It actually turns almost into night. It turns very, very dark. So I was like, wow, that's a very impressive video. So, I mean, that's the kind of conditions that you can quickly find yourself driving into. John, if a motorist were to find themselves driving into that or see that coming towards them on the road, or, many times they'll be parallel, the thing will be coming, they'll be driving, let's say, westbound, and they'll see it coming across the plain or the playa towards them. What should they do? How should they avoid getting into an accident?
Well, we have all these little sayings that we've been using all week, like when thunder roars, go indoors, turn around, don't drown. Well, Arizona Department of Transportation has this saying, pull aside, stay alive. And that's what you want to do if at all possible. The number one action to take is to get off the highway, not on the shoulder, off the highway. If that is not possible and all of a sudden you're stuck in this thing, well, you don't want to stop in the traffic lane. That's asking for a rear end. That's going to mess you up. You want to slow down in case you run into somebody who has stopped, okay? And if you are able, then of course you want your lights on. If you are able to pull off the highway, then you want to stop your engine, turn on your lights, okay, and then put on your emergency brake. But you don't, I'm sorry, Dan's probably shaking and says, John, no, turn off your lights. It's opposite from when you're driving, okay? Off your lights. Why would that be? Well, you saw that person, the video of them driving, and it was very hard to see the highway, right? Well, what are you going to be looking for to know where the highway is? Lights. So if you're safely off the road and your lights are on, somebody's driving, oh, there's the highway, and they'll pull off the highway right into you, slam into you. So you want to be off the highway, lights off, emergency brake on, and yeah. Hope we didn't confuse anybody there.
So basically, John, if they see it coming, if they can see the dust, and a lot of times with these haboobs, if they're paying attention, and a lot of times what we recommend is that maybe the driver needs to be concentrating on driving, but the passenger in the up front can kind of be, once in a while scanning the horizon from left to right to see if they're about to drive into something. If they see one of these off in the horizon, the best thing is to get off the highway and just pull over at a rest stop or hit the first exit and wait for it to pass on through, right?
Right, absolutely. Or if you see some sort of area where you can safely pull off and you're not going to get stuck. One thing that was brought up at the dust storm conference back in March is semis, they don't have much of a choice. It's hard for them. They're more limited in where they can pull safely off the road. Mm-hmm. And another thing that was brought up is folks from let's say Georgia, Alabama, driving out to Southern California to see the sights. They're driving into the desert Southwest. They don't know what these dust storms are, and they don't know what to do. So maybe getting the safety rules in hotels and restaurants, maybe on websites where they're looking before they travel. That's a good idea. Unfortunately, we don't want this kind of result. It's ironic that you have that sign there, caution, dust storms may exist. This is just east of the Arizona border into New Mexico on Interstate 10. 7 fatalities, several vehicles involved. They had to repair the road because it was the fire that broke out from the wreck was so hot. This is just very tragic.
It was. And was 2 years ago that happened?
No, a year ago, May.
Wow.
Something like May 22nd or something like that, yeah.
Now, John, you real briefly mentioned the dust conference or seminar. What was that about, and where was that held?
Well, I'll start mentioning it, but I'd like Dan to talk a little more about it because I've only been to one, and it was this year, and I presented on that very accident you saw, the type of weather that occurs, and some of the issues we have in the National Weather Service. The kind of products that we issue for that are not really satisfactory. Several of us warning coordination meteorologists, including Ken at Phoenix, and Ken in Tucson, Carrie in Albuquerque, and myself, we would like to have a specific dust storm warning tied to thunderstorms. A warning gets the attention more than a special weather statement, and but the kind of dust storm warning we have now covers counties for hours. That's not the kind of dust storm we're talking about here. And that conference addresses all kinds of things that, and Dan can talk more about it. You know, some of the ways we're trying to mitigate this thing. It's not that easy because a lot of private land is involved here that the people have just let go, and the dust kicks up rather easily, right, Dan?
Yeah, the interesting thing I think about dust is nobody owns the problem. It's a problem that affects so many different agencies and people and walks of life. There's health impacts associated with dust. There's transportation impacts associated with dust. Of course, there's the weather, which is what we're specialists in. But this dust workshop we just had our fourth one back in March. It brings together a number of National Weather Service offices. It brings together a couple of different departments of transportation. It brings together some of the health interests that are experts in things like valley fever, which is a big threat when it comes to these dust storms. And it brings along researchers, folks that are actively trying to figure out ways to detect dust, model dust so that we know it's coming. And it brings together experts who are looking at ways to mitigate dust from getting kicked up in the first place. It started 4 years ago. It was just an idea, and it's really taken off. And like John has said, it's really a great collaborative opportunity to bring all these separate groups together that would probably never talk to each other on a routine basis anyway. You get them in the same room together, you can start to make progress on a lot of these problems. The conference has gotten so successful that we actually are going to need a bigger room to meet in next year.
Great.
We started out with a handful of people. We're at the maximum capacity of the room that we've been using. So it just goes to show you how successful this has been so far, and we hope to continue upon that success moving forward.
You know, when I was helping John put together the presentation that he would give, and one of the instructions we got from the organizers was, don't tell us the meteorology that caused the dust storm. And that was basically, everybody at the conference knows what causes these haboops, and they're all trying to move beyond that. We know what causes them. Now they want to know, how do we detect them? How do we prevent them? What's the best strategy to keep people safe? So it was, you know, you guys have started off small, and it's growing, and now you're kind of maturing it and moving it beyond just what are dust storms, what are the hazards, but how can we mitigate them, how can we protect people from them, and just trying to get everyone to talk on the same page, which I think is a great way to get everything moving forward.
And Tim, I think it's really spawned a lot of new messaging ideas. I believe the Pull Aside, Stay Alive campaign was sort of a brainchild from one of those first workshops, and that has since really taken off. ADOT has been really active, soliciting input from just the general public. They're very active on social media. And one of the ideas, I believe, that came out of the workshop was coming up with this Haboob Haiku contest, where they would have folks tweet these haikus that they made that were about dust storms, and it was really successful a couple of years ago, and they're going to try it again this year as well. So they're really actively engaging the public to spread awareness, to spread safety messages, to give people a heads up so they don't find themselves in an unfortunate, dangerous, life-threatening situation.
And you mentioned how that Pull Aside, Stay Alive has really spread. Here in El Paso, one of the television stations tweeted, Pull Aside, Stay Alive. And, you know, that came from Arizona. It was great to see that.
Very good. And once again, if you're watching and you'd like to ask us a question, you can use you can use Twitter with the hashtag MAW2015, Monsoon Awareness 2015. So feel free to tweet any questions at us. Now, we've talked a lot about how the dust affects drivers, and I think Dan just touched on it briefly, but can one of you guys talk about the health issues related to the elderly or people at home as this big wall of dust comes in. I imagine that it severely affects people who are very sensitive to atmospheric conditions, people with asthma and other breathing problems, but it's also just probably a concern for the general public as well.
Well, I can segue into Dan because I like Dan to address some of the stuff, but I want to mention that one of the professors who is at UTEP, his specialty is dust. One of the things he said a couple of years ago that I never forget, we talk about the thunderstorm hazards like hail and lightning tornadoes and things like that, but the deaths that probably occur from the health side of dust storms are hard to track.
Mm-hmm.
They may be a lot more than you think. And then you add to that valley fever and things like that. And of course, valley fever was always thought to be San Joaquin Valley, Phoenix metro area thing, and we're finding out, no, it's in South Texas, it's in El Paso. There's more and more being discovered about that they're finding out. But Dan, you're kind of in the center there of a lot of this research. So can you carry on?
Hey, Dan, real quickly, can you kind of give a definition of what valley fever is?
So valley fever is a fungus that resides in the dust and dirt that's out in the open desert. And anytime that dust is disturbed and kicked up from gusty winds, and you breathe that into your lungs, you may not feel sick or have a hard time breathing right away, but a few days later, a few weeks later, you may not start to feel so hot. And it may be because you've breathed in this fungus, and it has a much more technical name than valley fever, but that's sort of the name that it's acquired over the years. And there is a link when you see these big dust storms moving through the Phoenix area. There's a little bit of a lag, but there's almost always a spike in cases of valley fever shortly thereafter. So not only is it a dangerous situation because of reduced visibilities, but there's substantial health impacts related with dust storms as well.
What can people do if they're at their home or they're driving towards home and they see one of these dust clouds coming? They're not driving. Should they go inside? Should they seal all the windows and doors, turn off air conditioners, or things like that? What are their best precautions to take to protect themselves?
Well, certainly I would say go inside. I know it's tempting to go outside and look at this massive wall of dust and the cooler temperatures that might come along with it, but believe me, that is not where you want to be. Get yourself inside. Maybe give the air conditioner a break for a couple minutes so you don't have to, so you're not drawing in any of that dust from outside, and just wait it out. It's not going to go on forever, but you definitely don't want to be outside. If you do happen to find yourself outside, maybe you're out for a walk and it creeps up on you and you didn't know it was coming, you can always try and just cover your nose or pull your shirt up above your nose just to try and mitigate how much of that dust gets into your system.
Wow.
I'm going to try to show one more video here of a dust storm as it's coming into. Part of this video is showing a dust storm coming into Sky Harbor Airport there in Phoenix, but it's kind of hard to see. But in the background at the very top of the screen, you can see the thunderstorm, and you can see this big wall of dust headed towards the airport. And we'll change positions here to a different part overlooking downtown here in a second. And you can see as the dust is building up, it's just like John said at the beginning of the broadcast, it is like a tidal wave of dust, and it just builds on across, coming across, and you can actually see it. It's Dan, John, how high would you say that is as it comes across?
Well, I remember seeing one that was connected to, I think, the highest wind speed recorded in the Phoenix metro area, 114, 115 miles per hour, back in 1996. Ahead of that storm was a haboob that was moving from north to south of all directions, and they have a little range there, and there's South Mountain, and Dan's very familiar with that. This was like 3 times the size of that at least, and swallowed the range. So we're talking thousands of feet, aren't we, Dan?
Yeah, easily. Some of our biggest dust storms are easily 3, 4, 5,000 feet tall. And Tim, I'm glad you showed that video because we've been talking a lot about traveling on the highways and pulling over and stuff like that. These dust storms, they affect aviation impacts as well. I mean, when that wall of dust comes over the airport, that's it, game over. You got to stop, and there's delays, and then that cascades downstream to other airports too. So even though we may be having a dust storm that's only affecting the Phoenix area, those impacts and problems can cascade out and affect lots of other people as well.
We talked a little bit about that yesterday when we were talking about with Jim Reynolds, who works at the Central Weather Service Unit in Albuquerque. He was addressing downburst winds and how that affects aviation. And we did mention how these downburst winds can kick up a lot of dust. And as you said, Dan, as the dust comes across the airport, if you can't see when you're driving a car on the road, imagine trying to land in an airplane. Not only can you not see where the runway is, but you've got probably a real strong wind trying to blow you off the runway. So like you said, once that dust comes across the airport, it's lights out literally for them.
Hey, Tim, I have a little confession time. When I lived in Phoenix, and I knew about these haboobs, and I knew one was coming. It was miles away. Curiosity gets the best of us meteorologists sometimes. We'll go out and watch lightning when we're not supposed to. Well, I started driving in the neighborhood and got caught in the haboob, and never again. I could not see the signals pulling up to an intersection. I had total loss of where you were. Never again. Don't do it.
I guess it'd be very similar to very dense fog, except that in this case, it can actually be bad for you to breathe in as well.
Right.
Well, we've gone over just a little bit over 30 minutes. Do either of you guys have anything else you want to talk about, dust related or haboob related?
Well, let me I made an observation as we were speaking. Just about every day this week, with just about every hazard, the recommendation's the same. Go indoors. Go indoors. And what's our temptation? You want to go out and see that lightning. If there's a tornado warning, where is it? Where is it? Oh, I want to see that haboob. Look at, no, go indoors.
And in this age in social media, you don't have to be the one. There's always someone seeming to be driving around taking pictures, and you can sit there and let them take the risk. We don't recommend anyone do that, but certainly don't put yourself at risk. If you're driving, get off the highway. If you can't get off the highway, pull over, turn off your lights. If you're at home, go inside, close the doors and windows, maybe turn off your air conditioners for a little while so you're not pulling in the dust as it comes on across. And then, Dan, about how long would you say that the thickest dust, I know it takes probably several hours for it all to settle out, but from onset to when maybe it might be safe to go back out, how long do you think that takes?
It depends how dense the dust is to begin with. A lot of times the visibilities will drop to almost zero and be back up to something not too bad after about an hour. There was an event in 2011 that is over my shoulder, the one that most people have seen. That may have been where some of the pictures you showed, Tim, came from. The astounding thing about that event was the visibilities. It was hard to see for hours after that, 4 to 5 hours after. You could at least see down the street after 4 or 5 hours. But it was just astonishing how much dirt and debris was just kicked up into the air with that storm. So most of the time things improve after an hour or so. But if it's a real significant storm, it can take several hours before things truly recover.
Wow. Hey, John, do you have anything else you want to add before we wrap this up?
No, basically, pull aside, stay alive. The motorists are the number one victims for immediate deaths, okay? But then for health aspects, go inside, so go inside, stay alive, so that's what I can say.
Very good. Well, I want to thank everybody for joining us via YouTube or Google+. I also want to thank our panelists tonight, John Fawcett from the El Paso office and Dan Lyons from the Phoenix office. You guys did a great job. I appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedules to join us tonight. Tomorrow we have one more of these Hangouts for Monsoon Awareness Week, and tomorrow we'll be talking about heat stress. So and I know that Phoenix, Dan, you guys set a record today, you said?
We tied a record today, and we tied a record yesterday, and it's going to be just as hot tomorrow. So heat is a big deal here in the Phoenix area.
How hot was it in Phoenix today?
Today we got up to 119. For what it's worth,
No, 115.
150.
Okay, I'm sorry, 115 here. It was 119 in one of our other cities nearby out in Blythe, California. So
Oh,
very.
Wow.
And John, you said El Paso hit their first 100-degree temperature today?
Yeah, we were about 13 degrees behind Phoenix. We hit 102 a couple of weeks later than in previous years, but it happened, and then we'll have it through the weekend. But fortunately, not as hot as Phoenix or even Tucson, and yet, because people aren't acclimatized to it yet, they still have to watch themselves, and we'll talk about that tomorrow.
Exactly. So if you're interested, stay attuned to your local National Weather Service social media channels. I know that Tucson, Phoenix, El Paso, Albuquerque are all tweeting out the links to tomorrow's Hangout. So I want to thank everybody who joined us tonight, and I hope to see you join us tomorrow. So thanks for joining us, and remember to stay safe.